All right. You good to go? All right, 5:30, we'll raise for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Attendance?
President Dr. Reese,
Present.
Vice President McDonough,
Here.
Secretary Summers here, Treasury Hanser,
Present.
Trustee Schultz,
Here.
and Trustee Schaefer,
Here.
and Trustee Whitney.
Here.
All present.
Great. Item number 2 on the agenda, changes to the board agenda. I have none. Item number 3, scheduled public comment for agenda items only. Mark Gillum, item number 4, consent agenda.
Good evening. I have a top 10 list that I'd like to see a superintendent implement. And number 1 was the implementation of standardized security protocols at all facilities. When doors are unlocked, everybody goes through Evolve. Number 2, reposition pictures of Hannah, Madison, Justin, and Tate from the performing arts storage corner over to the blue wall in the entry hallway of the high school, just west of the main office entrance. Number 3, allow students to continue with all previously planned murals and student-organized events associated with the November 30th anniversary in the remembrance of Hannah, Tate, Madison, and Justin. And instruct all counselors and staff to stop silencing children or trying to steer the narrative away from the evidence found in our investigative report. Number 4, plan a bronze memorial to the right of our Wildcat near the flags in the Wildcat Stadium. Number 5, open the high school to critical incident stress management resources that have been blocked since November 30th, including emergency services from county, state, and federal. Number 5, immediate firing of all individuals involved with the November 30th shooting, including Stephen Wolf, Pam Fine, and Jim Rourke. Number 6, filing of lawsuits against all individuals named in the investigation for the wrongful deaths of Hannah St. Juliana, Madison Baldwin, Justin Schilling, and Tate Muir because of their gross negligence and wanton indifference regarding the safety of our students. Number 7, a master plan to destroy and rebuild the area in the high school where our students were murdered needlessly, so that the following children coming up from the earlier grades do not have to try and learn in the middle of a murder scene. Those areas should be memorialized for all of time to remember the blessed lives of our missing students. The master plan should include architectural drawings of the new structure integrated with the existing building and accommodating offices for OVA, bridges, and a state-of-the-art lab for all STEM development, including our robotics team. Number 8, sale of the Drainer Road facility and any other properties not being utilized to educate the children of this community. Number 9, an evaluation, consolidation, and right-sizing of all administration employees by 50%. And number 10, a 20% increase in pay for all teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, item number 4 on the agenda is our consent agenda. As you can see, we have the minutes from last night's special meeting. I'll take a motion. Amanda,
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
do I have support? Mary?
Support.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Item number 5, superintendent search. We're still in our first round interviews. This is the second night. Angela is going to grab the candidate right now. The first one is Jennifer Herbstreit. There's just outside, so.
Jennifer Herbstreit.
Nice to meet you. I'm Erin Reese. And then
Hi, I'm Colleen Schultz.
Nice to meet you, Jennifer. Nice to meet you. Heather Schaefer. Pleasure to meet you.
James Summers, watch the boards.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Amanda McDonough, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. Nice to meet you.
Big test at the end.
I know, right? Yeah. The signs are for, right? Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming up here this afternoon and making
Absolutely.
time for us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So my name is Erin Reese. I'm the board president, and I'm joined here with my 6 other colleagues, and we're going to take some turns asking questions, so maybe bop around a little bit on the table for you,
Okay.
just so
Sounds
you
great.
know. But to get us started, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? We have OCTV here too, just so you know, so
Perfect.
this being broadcast to our community that couldn't be here in person.
Okay.
A little bit about your background, your strengths, what your past work experiences are, what you're doing now.
Perfect. So again, my name is Jennifer Herbstreit. I want to begin by just sharing my appreciation and gratitude for the opportunity to be here with you this evening. I'm really excited about the opportunity to lead Oxford Schools forward and to be able to be here this evening to share a little bit about who I am and what I've done and all of that. If I may, I'd like to begin a little bit with a personal piece and talk a little bit about who I am from that aspect to begin with. My husband, we've been married for many years, and he is a teacher, a middle school teacher for 25 years, and then just recently switched to elementary phys ed. So that's been a really fun experience for all of us, and watching him go through that transition. But we met as teachers in our middle school, as I was also a former middle school teacher. He was a socialist teacher, I was a math teacher. We live in the community where we taught in Fenton, which is, I think, a community that's very similar to Oxford in a lot of ways. A little bit smaller, but very similar. And we really enjoyed and appreciated what it meant to both not only teach in that community, but live in that community and raise our kids and have our kids go through the school system that we worked in and were a part of. When you do something like that, teaching's not a job. Working in the schools is not a job, it's just part of your life and part of who you are as people. And so I think that, I share that because I think that really is a lot of what makes me who I am today and where I'm at as a leader, and what I value with our students and staff and community as a whole because of those experiences. We have 3 children, as I briefly mentioned. They're all out of the public school system. I have our oldest is working at United Wholesale Mortgage in Troy and doing very, very well. Our son is in California. He moved to Santa Monica right after high school graduation and has been there since. And our youngest is a junior and a college athlete at Saginaw Valley University, and she's on the women's golf team there. So that is a lot of fun and keeps us busy as she's continuing to wrap up her college experience. So that's great. Professionally, as I mentioned, I spent many years in the classroom, and I think that too shapes who I am today. Some folks go through a short period of time in the classroom and then move into leadership. I was in the classroom for 17 years, and I think because of that, I keep the classroom very, very close to my heart. My decisions that I make are rooted in what's best for kids and for teachers because one, my husband keeps me grounded on what it was like to be in the classroom still, and that experience as well. During that time as a math teacher at the middle school, I was fortunate to be involved in a lot of aspects outside of the classroom as well. Strong leader within the math department, and led lots of student clubs and was a coordinator of class trips and things like that, which then led me into being the MYP coordinator in my few final years in teaching. So as you likely know, Fenton also was one of the first districts in the state of Michigan to adopt the IB program. At that time, we were a K-12 IB program. They've since reduced that down just to the diploma program. But at that time, I was the MYP coordinator for several years, and that really was my launch into curriculum leadership and whatnot. And I learned a great deal about working and building teams and whatnot to move curriculum forward. So that was a great experience. And then I went into formal leadership with guidance and support from my leaders and learned a lot from them, and went into elementary principalship at a small district in Byron, which is west of Fenton and Linden, about 1,000 students at the time. So therefore, if you've ever been familiar with a really small district like that, you know that you wear a lot of hats. The leadership team was the superintendent, the high school, middle school principal, and myself. So I was also the curriculum director of the district, and I was also the technology director of the district. And while it seems like a lot, it was a real benefit in the sense that I learned a great deal very quickly about running a district from all aspects and all areas, because I was sat right next to the superintendent. I was there with her as she made difficult decisions. We were a declining district and losing students quickly, and went through a process of having to lay off many staff members, which is a really difficult process because you don't have that many teachers in a small district like that to begin with, and then to have to cut staff, you're cutting strong teachers at the point we were at, and it's a difficult process. But again, it was a real learning experience to be able to do that, to do it with dignity, to support people as they went through that difficult process of losing their jobs and having to, find their next path. As a part of that, I had this idea in my mind that I was in a small district, and so my learning was capped to a degree. It was probably a mistake in my perception of what I could or couldn't learn there, but I thought that if I went to a larger district, I would be able to continue my own learning path as a leader. So applied for a job and was given a job in South Lyon as an elementary principal of a very large district and a very large elementary school. I had 650 students in my elementary. I did not have an assistant principal or anything. And it was me and my wonderful women in the office with me that took on the world at Sayre. It was great, but learned a lot. But what I found out that I didn't realize is that actually in a larger district like that, I was much more isolated from outside of my building because I didn't need to be involved at the county. I didn't need to be involved in the higher end work at the district level because there were so many layers. But I did learn a lot about systems in that district and the need for systems in order to build consistency and accountability within the system. That's paramount in a large district like that. Pardon me. Really fine-tuned, I think, my skills in building teams and bringing diverse teams together. We had a great team that, when it was my first experience of this nature, and a leadership team within the building that consisted of staff and parents. Today, if I had that team together, I would also put students on that team. But they were involved in making all of the major decisions within the building. And that was a really great experience as well. And again, learned a lot from that. Sure throughout the evening I'll tell you more about my accomplishments in those roles. And then that led me to applying for and taking the position in Holly Schools as the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction. And while I am the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, and I do deal a lot with that, I kind of serve in a Deputy Superintendent role in the sense that I sit very closely with the Superintendent and have been involved in all facets of district decisions and operations. Everything from HR and hiring and managing and working through difficult staffing situations to obviously I'm in charge of the technology department again, moving programs forward, working through transportation issues, supporting students, staff. I'm in charge of helping to develop principles and lead our principal work. I have been largely involved in 2 successful bond issues, along with the superintendent and the assistant superintendent for business services. as well as a millage, successful millage. We're currently building a new middle school, which I love. I love that process, that design process, the whole bond process. I really enjoy, and been largely involved in being in the community and promoting and doing the work that we need to do, the campaigning to move that bond forward. So again, while I sit in that curriculum role, I have a lot of experience in all aspects of district operations, and so that obviously has led me to here. And I think that in my 6 years of sitting in the assistant superintendent role, I'm ready to lead a district. And Oxford, where you have been and where you are, and the perceived needs that I have, or that I perceive that you have, I apologize, from just what I know about the district, from being relatively close but a little separated, but also in reviewing all the things that are great about the district. I think that my skills and strengths match your needs very, very well. So I'm excited to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. She answered the second question in that one.
did.
It's on you.
I was thinking the same thing. Moving right on. Thank you, Jennifer.
Sure.
I'm going to talk a little bit about public relations. Oh, sorry. I'm going to talk a little bit about public relations. What strategies have you used in the past as assistant superintendent, or would you use to find time to balance your district visibility and the community and kind
Sure.
of where you're at?
Yeah, there's a lot, right? There's a lot to be done, and being strategic in a lot of ways is important. Building time into your calendar, being intentional about how you use your time, using your staff and your team as much as you can to use everyone's strengths and areas of expertise to tackle all of the things. I think it's extremely important to be in the community, both within the school community, and be visible and be in attendance to things, whether it's just sitting down in kindergarten classroom on the carpet and listening to a story, or whether it's being at sporting events or being at the middle school for various events, all the different things, plays, all of that. That's all very important, and that's where you start building those relationships and making connections with kids and with staff and with families. But I also think it's really important to be in the greater community as well. We're active in the Chamber of Commerce. I'm active in my home community and have been in the foundation. Holly doesn't really have an educational foundation quite in that manner, but being a part of Rotaries and different organizations within the community is really, really important. As I mentioned, and when I began, being a community member, I think, is really important to that part. So, I would be fully vested in moving to Oxford and being a part of that, being a part of this community, and that right there builds in a layer of being involved and being connected and being in the things that are happening, and so being strategic, putting things in your calendar, intentionally planning your time, using your team to help support that. I think those are all really key areas to being able to balance your time. We found as a team that sometimes, you can there's a lot that happens, as I said, starting out, and you can easily get sucked into your office with all of the things. And so we've done things even like popsicle sticks with every teacher's name on it, and you pull a popsicle stick or 2 or 3 each day, and you go into those teachers' classrooms to get you into classrooms that maybe you wouldn't naturally gravitate to get you into a classroom that maybe the teacher doesn't feel comfortable inviting you into, but they've got great things going on, and maybe they're shyer or more reserved, and they don't want to bother you, that kind of thing, and forcing you to get out of your office, and so doing strategies like that are unique and fun and build some joy in, and but also serve the purpose of getting involved and being out and being seen and actively being in buildings, which is the fun part. That's why we're here.
I love it. I love the popsicle stick
Yeah.
idea too. My daughter's third grade teacher used that. We still have the stick.
Yep.
We put a magnet on it, and it's
Nice.
on our fridge. It's so. I thought that was the cutest idea. She
Yeah.
did that. I think a couple of our staff do that.
Yeah.
But I think that's a great
It's
idea.
a great way to force you to randomize
Yeah.
some things.
What is your communication style, and how do you plan on communicating and using that towards building a stakeholder and community. You kind of covered it in what
Yeah,
you
sure.
just said.
Yeah, so I think communication is really important. I think the root of most problems is poor communication, misunderstanding, or lack of communication. And so transparent, honest communication. I'm a pretty straightforward person in most respects. And so I think it's really important to tell people why you are making decisions that you're making and to communicate them clearly and concisely. I think it's important to, especially in written communication, to choose your words wisely so that people fully understand your intent and the purpose of your communication and what you're trying to convey. I know I learned as a building principal quickly that written communication, email often, can really quickly be misunderstood. And I learned that through my own errors in the sense that I might receive an email from a parent, and I would read the email and insert tone, insert intent into an email, and then I would pick up and call the parent and talk to them, and what they conveyed verbally was nothing like what I put into their written word. And so I've learned that, when you do send written communications, you need to be really careful in crafting that so that the tone and the intent comes through clearly that you're intending to send. And that the information that everyone needs is fully there to answer their questions. But I also learned that verbal communication, in-person, face-to-face communication is often the best road. So when you can, that's the approach I like to take. And I think that communication often has to be rooted in the why, giving people the background as to why things are happening the way they're happening. If you don't do that, people create their own stories. If you don't tell a full story and the why behind the story, then people create their own because they want that information, they want to search for that, and without you supplying it, they're left to figure it out themselves, and that usually doesn't work out well for us. So I think that's an important piece as well. So transparent, clear. I try to be concise. People are busy. They don't want to read, multi-page emails from you and things like that. So I try to be concise, but to give all of the information that's necessary in a way that is supportive and honest. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate you explaining the transparency part. That was going to be the next question, but you kind of led into it, which is fine. So switching gears a little bit, how do you handle difficult conversations with stakeholders? How do you approach that?
Sure. Well, yeah, it's par for the course. It's a part of the process. When you're working with hundreds of people, and we're all human, you're going to have challenges. You're going to have disagreements. You're going to have difficult situations that you have to work through. And so it's just a part of the job. And so again, it goes back to that transparency and that honesty and the why. I think that really rooted, though, at the beginning of that is the building relationships. As a leader, my foundational belief is that everything starts with the relationships that you build. And so when you talk about transparency, and dealing with difficult situations, when you've begun at the beginning with developing and putting the time and the effort in to build strong relationships with the people that you're working with and the people that you're engaging with, it makes those difficult conversations easier to navigate and move through. Being a part of the community, being active, building connections with people, those are all pieces that help support things when you're in difficult times. And we all go through difficult times. So setting that foundation is, I think, a primary role when you're starting in a position like this. But to just kind of step back again, and that difficult situation piece is really beyond the relationship piece. It's about being clear again, being concise, and understanding why you're doing the things that you're doing. So keeping kids at the root of those decisions, what's best for kids. So we might be in a difficult situation, but always going back to what's best for kids, and then what's best for staff is helpful in those situations as well. So, yeah.
Okay, I'm next. Jennifer, sorry about at the beginning, we had a little copying error. So there's new paperwork going
Oh,
around.
no problem.
So, sorry about that.
That's
As you were
okay.
talking, I was rolling around up here.
I don't have the right questions.
Okay.
No problem.
Okay, I'm going to talk about and ask you some questions about student achievement.
Okay.
What are the most important areas in which the Oxford Community Schools should invest time and money to ensure student success?
Sure. Well, I want to start by saying that I'm close enough to Oxford to have known about Oxford for quite a long time. And I consider and have considered for many years Oxford to be one of the premier school districts in the state of Michigan. Not only as a great community, but this district has always been on the forefront of innovation and one of the leading districts in the state as far as moving things forward. The academic picture within the district is extremely strong. Both your AP lens and your IB piece, there's great programs in the classroom, out of the classroom, and everything around it. So academics is strong here, and I think that's one of the pieces that makes it a premier district. I think that one of the key areas that we as all districts need to continue to focus on is in improving and growing is our ability to support all learners. We do a great job in a lot of places of supporting our learners that are in that IB path and that AP path, but are we putting the same amount of effort and financial resources and innovation into students that aren't necessarily on that track? We have a growing population of students who are choosing not to go to four-year institutions because the cost is not, cost benefit is not there anymore. So how are we setting those students up for success? That's an area that I've been very passionate about. Again, that four-year path, the IB, the AP, it's important. We need to keep it going and keep it strong, keep it where it's at, and build upon it where applicable. But really designing opportunities to set students up who are not going in that path is something that we've been working diligently on, and I'm really proud of the work we've done to expand opportunities and programs within our district. It really began by a construction trades program that we did not really have, that now our students walk out of construction trades and are have an OSHA 10 and OSHA 30 safety certificates. They are able to go straight into apprenticeships, and when they walk out of Holly High School, they are a year or two ahead of their high school graduating counterparts and are able to get right into jobs with apprenticeships and whatnot. We're opening pathways for students in other areas to get certifications. We just signed an agreement for a fire school for some of our students to participate in. We've signed for an ROTC program where students can be a part of that. We have students this year who have partnered with another organization to part-time get into their aviation path. They've want to go into aviation. We clearly don't teach aviation at Holly High School, but we found a partner that would partner with us so that they could do part of their time in Holly High School and part of their time in this aviation program. We have what I would call some professional skiers, and they're probably not professional because I don't know if that's a thing or not, but they are very, very elite skiers, and so during the winter they leave. But during the fall and the spring, when they come back home, they want to be in person and they want to be in school with their peers. So we designed a program for them so that they could be virtual and remote during their ski season and be out and doing their competitions and going wherever they go to Canada and Europe and wherever they travel. But then when they come home, they can be high school kids. Tailoring programs to support that meet Michigan merit, that meet board requirements and graduation requirements, but that also, more importantly, meet the needs of individual kids, I think is a really, really important piece of where we're at for today's learners. And recognizing that today's learners are not us. They're so different. The world they're growing up is so different than the world we grew up in. And so we as educators need to adapt and meet them where they're at and provide awesome opportunities for them. So I hope that answered your question. But that's an area that I think all schools, including Oxford, probably could benefit from.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I have one more question.
Sure.
What do you see being the biggest challenges for the student achievement for student achievement in Oxford?
Sure. And I think Oxford is similar to all districts and all schools right now, and I think our biggest challenge is the balance of what kids need today, and their social emotional needs, their wellness needs are so much different now. Kids are coming to us as very different little humans than they ever have before, and the need for that balance in what teachers are doing with kids in that area of social emotional learning and student wellness, I think is new and paramount to their success in their academics as well. And I know, obviously, you have done a great deal of work in that area, and I think that's something that we all can continue to grow on, but I think that right now is our biggest challenge. You have a phenomenal curriculum department, and the best practices are in place. Top-notch resources are in place. And so it's really about helping support teachers and the balance of being able to do both the academics as well as building in appropriate opportunities for the social, emotional, and wellness development that students have as they grow and develop from the beginning to the end, so to speak. Yeah. Yeah.
So, can you tell me a little bit how you would envision, as superintendent at Oxford, how you would bring together parents, community, outside organizations, and governments with the school district to create a healthy and safe learning environment
Yeah,
and working
sure.
environment?
So we're entering into a lot of partnerships over the last couple of years, and everything from partnerships to support student wellness to partnerships to support academic programs and opportunities for kids to go beyond and outside of our traditional classrooms, and partnerships to support our staff development and our development in our vision and whatnot. We've partnered with an organization called Fielding International. Fielding International is an educational and architectural design firm. They began as an architectural design firm building schools. And they added on the educational design piece, and they do a lot of work with schools on visioning, on creating a path forward, and on innovation. And that partnership has been really paramount in us supporting our staff and shifting our thought processes around where kids are at and what they need in today's world in order to be the productive and successful adults that we want them to be. And so that's been a huge partnership. And I initiated that partnership as I came in contact with them from a conference that I was at, and have developed a very close relationship with many of the people we work with from there because they're just great thought partners. So that's been a real valuable piece. I think that just getting out into the community and being a part of the community, our community members are phenomenal resources for our schools. I was recently visiting a school in Iowa. It's called Ignite Pathways, and they do a lot of really unique things as far as career-based pathway high school programs. And one of the unique things they do is they bring in community members to help support the instruction. So a local nurse comes in and helps support the instruction in the classroom and partners with a science teacher or with an ELA teacher to embed core content into health-related pathway courses so that the students can then open up time in their schedule to be able to participate in these health-related courses, but also get their core content that's required for graduation and whatnot. So partnering with community members who can come in and support the education of our students, I think is a great resource and something that can really move our programs and our opportunities for kids forward. But again, it's about being out, it's about making connections, it's about being involved in the community. Our parents are a large resource there, and so getting parents actively involved. We know our parents are deeply involved at our elementary schools, but that kind of wanes quite frequently when you get to middle school and high school. And I think they can be a great resource in our classrooms at the middle school and high school as well. So getting parents actively involved and students. Students should be involved in all of that, in all of those discussions. There's so much value in student voice and bringing their voice into the conversations about what opportunities they want to have and what they feel like they need. So getting them involved is a huge part as well. So making connections, being visible, and building relationships with community members and organizations is a huge piece of that. Yeah.
So how would you describe your leadership style or leadership philosophy in creating collaboration between school administrators and teachers?
Sure. Again, I'm going to start where I kind of go back to where I started in building relationships. So it begins from day one and even before day one with building relationships and making connections. I think that building a culture of trust is very important and is the foundation of the work that I do. That's just how I function. And you do that by talking to people, connecting with them, letting them know that you care about them, learning about them, and their families and what's important to them and what they're doing in their classrooms or what they're doing, in their buildings. So it begins there. It begins with that piece. I also think it's really important that you involve people in decision making. I'm a very collaborative leader and believe deeply in that, the more voices that we have in the room, the better in most instances. I learned in my current role that I need to be quiet and I need to listen because as soon as we often talk as assistant superintendent or superintendent, other people will stop talking. And it's natural for them to think that your voice is the voice that matters, and it's really quite opposite. I try to be quiet. I try to listen. I try to ask questions that will provide more information, and I want that information from those that are connected to whatever conversation we're having, whatever the topic might be, those that are impacted, and those that maybe are even like on the side of being impacted. But bringing people together, building relationships, building trust, and involving people in the conversation. There's a book that we did a book study on, and it had a line, and I might misquote it, so I apologize, but it said something to the effect of, build nothing for us without us. And I thought that was a great line that really stood out in that leadership book to me because it's so true. When you involve people in the creation of the things that are going to be for them, they will 100% run with it. And they make it way better than you ever could have made it on your own too. So I'm a firm believer in involving people in that. And it goes beyond just our administrators and our teachers. It goes to our other staff members are very important in the decisions that are how our buildings are operating and how they're that they're functioning and how we're engaging with kids, especially in spaces that maybe they're in charge of. And I think the number one person who needs to be in the conversation are kids, our students. Our students have so much to offer. We've done many focus groups over the last few years with students, and I have been blown away at what we get from students. We've primarily been working at the secondary level with middle school and high school students, and what they can tell you about what they need and what they want in school is phenomenal, and we need to listen to them more.
Thank you.
Yep.
So it was noted, excuse me, in many of the focus groups that the student, staff, and community are deeply affected by the school shooting of 2021. What experiences, philosophy, or trainings do you have in the following areas? School safety, trauma-informed care, crisis management, and policy management.
Sure. So I want to begin by, my condolences and my heartfelt sympathy. There's no words, right? There's no words that anybody can say. As I would consider us a fairly neighboring district, I have worked closely with members of this community in my role through Oakland schools and whatnot, and our ski teams partner with each other, and we have employees and teachers in our building who live in this community and who had students in this community and in the high school. While in no way, shape, or form would I ever begin to say that I know how anybody feels that was here on this day or the days before and after, but we did feel that reverberating effect. And I think, like all districts around, you know, it has had a significant impact on our redoubling of our efforts of safety and security. Prior to that day, I had been involved in safety trainings, ALICE training, various, you know, CPRs and CPI and de-escalation trainings and things of that nature. So I am trained in those areas and always can continue to, you know, important to redo that all the time as well. Also been very active in the development of our policies and our practices with regards to safety and security within our district. We have, you know, again, like I said, redoubled our efforts, and we've brought in security guards as well. Prior to COVID, we had passed a bond issue in which we put secure entranceways in all of our buildings. We actually were just having a conversation this morning in a cabinet meeting about the fact that we actually are pretty far forward from a lot of districts where we're at with regards to security and safety. There's so many districts that still don't have secure entranceways, which is really amazing in today's time. But of course, it's a huge financial commitment to get there, to build those. So we were fortunate that our community passed a bond and we were able to do that at every one of our buildings. So yes, I have lots of experience in those areas. I'm not officially trauma certified. I have been a part of trauma workshops. One of the things that I think is really interesting about the work around trauma and leading through trauma and things like that is that it really parallels closely with building trust. And when you do work around what it means to build trust in a community or within an organization, the two pieces parallel very, very well. And so I've had a lot of work in that area as well. But again, always I'm passionate about that, so I'm interested in that. So I'm always open to and willing to continue that learning in that area as well. I think they're just solid pieces for working with other humans and learning and continuing to learn to treat people well and be human-centered in your decision-making. And so those are always really helpful pieces. And the policy piece, you know, in my role, I'm very active. We actually are in a pretty interesting situation that we're kind of getting through. And while our superintendent has taken the bulk of the lead on this, I've been part of it as well. And that a few superintendents ago, there was a superintendent who just basically wiped out all the policies. He just got rid of them, shredded them. So we were really working with hardly any official policies within the district. And so for the past 10 years, the district's really been building policies back. And it's an important piece of the district. You know, it's a guiding post. It's, you know, the board and the superintendent's primary role is to set that policy and to help as a guide, so to speak, for the district. And so I've been actively involved in that work. And I think policy can be a real tool as well. When we talk about innovation, we talk about shifting and making changes, having policies around academics and what kids should experience and to get through the program can be really helpful to drive change. Because it's now a policy. It's a part of what the board expects. And so it's what the district will live out. So those are all pieces of that I've been actively involved in, and I'm always happy to continue to learn more and value that learning.
Thank you. And you touched on a little bit, so if you want to just say a little, you
Sure.
can. As the new leader, how do you help the school district and community heal and at the same time move the district forward educationally?
Sure, absolutely. So again, I think it goes back to that relationship building and being visible and present, listening to people. I've learned over the years that oftentimes people just need to feel heard and validated, and that their opinions matter. And so when you talk about healing, there's a lot of that in there. I take a very human-centered approach and a student-centered approach, and putting people first, I think, is really important to that. I think it's really important to bring people together in that healing process. I've said it a couple of times, but this is a phenomenal community and an exceptional school district. And I think from what I read and what I observe, people want and are ready to move forward. They want want that opportunity. And I think that by bringing people together and involving them in the ability to move forward and creating that path forward, is a big step in that as well. It goes back to that "don't build us without us" piece, right? like, so involving staff and students and community members in that process, I think is key as well. I don't want to keep going on because, like you said, I already touched on it a bit, so, yeah.
Okay, over to me. As far as district management is concerned, I know you've mentioned that you're using your staff and employees' strengths to be efficient. You're, you know, forming that support and for balance, and you're a collaborative leader. But what is the level of involvement and participation of certain employees in your organizational decisions? How do you determine what groups to include and when?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's important to include staff members at all levels and students, as I mentioned earlier, and even community or family members, depending on what the topic is that you're covering and making decisions about, what it is you're designing and building. So bringing people with varied levels of expertise, various types of knowledge, various connections to the topic that that you might be covering or discussing or building upon. For example, we have been on a path of reimagining what secondary education can look like for kids. And when we started that work, it's being led and facilitated by Fielding International. And when we started that work, I needed to create a diverse group to come together to begin and kind of launch that. And so I brought together teachers who are from various grade levels, various disciplines, and who are involved in the district in various ways. I brought together academic coaches, social workers, administrators, board members, students, a couple of community members that are in different types of business that might lend information and viewpoints that are different than those of us who've only been in school would have. Things like that, so an approach like that, trying to provide varied perspectives within the room that can benefit and grow the conversation and take it farther than a couple of us who do the same thing could come up with, right? So we might have great minds, we might be innovative, we might have great experiences, but our thinking is limited to what we know and what we've experienced. So trying to bring in diverse experiences and perspectives helps us to get a lot farther.
Okay, and you did also mention that as a principal, you were next to the superintendent in Linden when you had to make quite difficult decisions. But for you personally, what is the most unpopular or challenging decision that you have had to make, and how did you handle the reaction to this decision? What might you have done differently?
Sure. So when you ask that question, the first thing that comes to mind is, as an elementary principal, I implemented some safety and security pieces at an elementary building that were not normal at the time and that were not popular. But I did so because of where the building was at. So at the time, parents were able to come into the building in the morning primarily, but anytime really. They would walk their kids to class. They would hang out in the hallways. They would socialize. I mean, they'd like to be in part of the school community, right? And they had positive intentions, but the problem was there were so many people in the buildings, and it was preventing school from starting. It was causing problems for teachers to be able to get kids into class, start the day. Students who already have separation issues were, it was compounding that piece because mom or dad wasn't leaving and then giving us the opportunity to move on with the day. There were lots of different things, on top of the fact that we didn't know who was in the building at any given time. If there had been an emergency in the building, I would have had no idea who was in that building, where anybody was, and that would have been a real concern for me as the building leader. And so we implemented practices and policies that stopped that. And we honored parents' need to, at the beginning of the school year, to be able to come in and see the classroom and know where their child's walking and to have that visual. But then after about a week, we stopped that, we closed that down, and you were, say goodbye at the door. And kids were coming in, and we had teachers throughout the building. We had student leaders throughout the building helping support all of our students, even our youngest students, getting to class. And at first, that was not a very popular decision. There were parents that were very, very upset. I had a couple of parents who would insist to come. They would come right in the entranceway of the door. They wouldn't stay outside and say goodbye. They would come right in the entranceway of the door so that they could watch them go down the hallway. And I just kind of monitored that. And I built relationships with those parents, and they were not pushing it too far. And we were able to work through it as we built relationships and whatnot. And over time, while that was not a popular decision at the start, it became the norm, and it became the preferred decision because parents saw that was really born out of safety and security of their children. And so that was a student and staff-centered decision that I felt was paramount for the safety and security of our building. And while I would say I would have done it any differently. I felt like I communicated very, very well. If you've been an elementary parent and you've been in an elementary building, you know that's a learning, like especially if it's your first child, right? It's different to take your kid and leave them with other people for a whole day, and so it's a process for parents too. So we tried to do that in a very respectful way to parents at the same time, but it wasn't popular, but it turned out great. It turned out very well.
Yep. Yeah.
Over to me.
Okay.
Welcome. I have a question on board superintendent relationships. How do you view the board superintendent relationship? How will you keep board members informed and communicate with us?
Sure. Obviously, it's a really important relationship. I see the board and the superintendent in partnership in steering the ship, so to speak. It's our job to ensure that we're on the right course and we're going in the right direction. And so communication amongst us is really important. Weekly communication, and then as a regular note, but then as things happen throughout the week, of course, communication about those things as well. I think it's also important for us to build relationships and for me to learn. You're 7 unique individuals, and so you have unique needs. So what one person might need as far as communication might be different from another person. One person might want a phone call every time something happens. Another person might be like, shoot me a text if it's something important. So, learning what your needs are will help to develop that communication plan as we build relationships and learn to work together. I also think it's important for us to learn how we want to function and govern together. We did a great workshop with our board and a book study on board governance, and it was really, really helpful to bring the board together as a team with the superintendent. We created a board handbook out of it, which has been really helpful, especially when onboarding new board members. It's been a really supportive process. As you all know, when you come onto a school board for your first time, there's a lot going on in a school district, and there's a lot to learn, and you're making decisions very quickly, and you might not, have all of the information yet. So that can be an intimidating process. So helping support that process, too, has been really helpful for us and something I would love to move forward and continue with. But, yeah, I think it's just really important to have that personal development of communication styles, but also regular communication. And of course, working with the board president on a regular basis as well.
Okay. Go ahead. Yep, go ahead.
I recognize that we were
Well,
short on time.
In an effort to achieve what is referred to in other industries as high reliability or just culture, how do you perceive the role of the superintendent in achieving that in Oxford?
Yeah, I think it's a key role, right? The superintendent sets the culture of the district and sets the vision, and I believe strongly in creating a culture of trust and support. I think it's my job to support all the members of this district and make sure that they have all the things that they need so they can do their jobs, so that they can ensure that students are successful. And one of those pieces is feeling safe. One of those pieces is feeling like their ideas matter, their contributions matter, and that's all part of the culture of trust and creating that. So it's very intentional to do that, and you do that again by building relationships. I keep saying that, but it's an important piece for me, and showing them that when they step up and when they offer their ideas and when they that you value them. and that you run with them some of the times. And you know, depending on the situation, I mean, obviously we can't move forward with every idea that comes out there, and we can't always make everybody happy. But I think valuing people's voice and creating an environment where it's safe for them to speak their voice and to share is a part of that culture. And it's the kind of culture that I think is really important, especially in a school district.
Do you have any questions for us?
I have one. Really, given where you're at and where you've been, I wonder if the district is running perfectly and everything is clicking. What does that look like for you? What does that sound like? What's happening if the district is in a really good place and running well?
I think, you know, and you guys can feel free to speak up too as well. I think if we were in a perfect world, in a perfect day,
Yeah.
a really well-run district would, we would have really high levels of engagement of all of our stakeholders, teachers, students, parents, community. And what that looks like too is there's good communication, bi-directional. It's not one way, it goes both ways. In a perfect world, we make perfect decisions. We do not live in a perfect world, so I would have to say is learning from the decisions and how do we use data to drive our decision-making in a positive manner. That's consumable by all stakeholders, right? I think educators, and I fall into that bucket as well, we speak our language well. Not everyone speaks our language well. So that'd be my comment.
Okay.
Good. All right.
All right.
Well, we appreciate you coming out. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Yeah.
Thank you. And if I might, yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I can shake hands too. I apologize. I should have shaken hands too.
That's great.
Just focus on getting out of your way.
Oh, thank you so much.
Be careful of the cord.
Yes.
Pleasure meeting you again.
Thank you.
Thank
Pleasure
you so
meeting you
much.
as well. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you. Thanks.
Do you want a break? I don't need one. No. Do you guys have the right papers? All right. Yeah, we're ready. We'll be fine. Speaking for everyone, we'll be fine.
James Summers. Think about careful with cords. Yep. Tape them up.
They're more tape today.
Mary Hanson, nice to meet you.
Evening, everybody. Sorry my back's to you. Happy to turn sideways and make you part of the process. All right, whenever you're ready.
I'm ready. Thank you so much for coming. Again, I'm Erin Reese, the board president, and then I'm joined with my colleagues. We're going to kind of bounce around a little bit, asking
Sure.
questions. And just so you know, the gentleman in the corner over there is OCTV, and we're live streaming to our families who can't be with us tonight. So thank you so much for coming.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Yes. So why don't you start by taking a few minutes to introduce yourself to us and share some information about your background, your strengths, some of the work you've been doing over the past few years or your
Sure.
lifetime.
Well, again, thank you for the opportunity, everybody, and for those at home, thank you for participating this evening. My name's Cormac Lynn. I have over 20-plus years in education. It started for me my sophomore year in high school, and I remember telling my high school social studies teacher, Mr. Stoppa, one day I'm going to have your job. I'm not trying to take your job, but I'm going to be a teacher. And that was really it. And that is really where I started, and it didn't change from there. My roles changed. So I started teaching, then worked into administration while still teaching, and then moved almost exclusively into administration while still teaching some elective classes. Then I moved fully into administration, but still taught at the college level. I've been doing that for over 10 years. Most recently, and currently I serve as the superintendent of schools for the Catholic Diocese of Saginaw. So we have schools across mid-Michigan, all the way from Harbor Beach up in the Thumb, Pinconning, Saginaw, Bay City, Alma, Auburn, Midland, Mount Pleasant, and Beale City. So I have a little bit of a range. We have 3 K-12 systems within those schools, a number of K-5, K-6, K-8 schools, and so I'm in my 6th year currently in that position. Most recently, within the last roughly year and a half, we started a district-wide initiative that is really focused on helping our schools be excellent. Right? The investment in excellence is really what that program is called, and that has a number of different aspects. Obviously, we want to provide an excellent education, but to be able to do that, we need to make sure that we are financially sustainable and healthy, and so we've created some key performance indicators to help us identify what a healthy school looks like financially. We've really worked hard, and my colleagues and I have worked really hard over the past couple of years to try to build more collaboration across our schools, although they're spread out by a significant range, hours at times. When we come together, we intentionally set time apart to be together, try to help them, because many of our teachers are the only third grade teacher in that building. And so to really help them come together and provide that opportunity. So that's taken on a lot of my time over the past couple of years, the investment in excellence. And so we're working really hard to make sure that we support our principals. That's what I see as my primary role in my current position. I tell them all the time, I wish I could not give you more work, but my goal is to take things off your plate so you can focus on what you do best, which is lead your building, lead your staff, and serve your students. So that's a short version. I'd say most recently I'm potentially scheduled to defend my dissertation on the 22nd, and so I'm excited about that. Looking forward to being done. It's been a journey, and I know my kids are as well. My son asked, why does Daddy keep going to school? So that's a short version. So can I ask one question just for my own? Are we on a strict 50-minute time window? I just want to be respectful of that.
Ish. Yeah, ish.
Okay, all right, that's helpful. Thank you.
Depends on the conversation.
Okay.
So, leading into that, why are you looking at Oxford Schools as your next opportunity?
So for me, from the time I started teaching, I remember having a conversation with my principal at the time, or head of school. I said, I just want to keep growing. And right now, there's not that chance for me. That's what I told him then. And not that I can't grow in my current position, but I live in Clarkston. And so for me, one of the things I've missed over the past 6 years or 5+ years is really being close enough to the communities that I serve where I can be a little more engaged in that. In my time in St. Mary's, we were there a lot, right? Just the nature of serving a school community. And so that has been something that has been a little bit missing. I'm involved, I'm still present, but when you're 2+ hours away, sometimes you can't always go to watch that performance. I was lucky to go to Mount Pleasant to watch 2 of our schools play in boys districts a couple weeks ago. But that's something that is missing for me in terms of being closer to the community and being able to do some of those things a little bit more time-friendly for me. Oxford specifically, one of the things that has stood out to me about Oxford is the opportunities, the range of opportunities that is available to the students and families here. There's not just one thing, right? I mean, there are a lot. You can't be all things to all people, but the range in terms of, the IB program, the CTE program, things that people may not know about, like the dance program, right? The virtual program, just the range of services and opportunities that we can provide to the community and that Oxford does provide to the community. That's something that it was interesting to me. And I actually did apply for a job within Oxford a number of years ago at the high school level, and so it's kind of been on my radar for a little while. And I'm professionally looking for that opportunity to get back into I'll say a district, right? A self-contained district to really be able to be part of that community again. I mean, even my kids bring it up, like, hey, how come we don't go to the football games as much? Or, my son remembers being on Ford Field. He's like, when do I get to go to Ford Field again? I'm like, well, buddy, if we're lucky, So for me, Oxford, the opportunities that it provides its families, its students, I think that my background could meet some of the current needs that I believe are present, and based on the survey that was provided and the leadership profile report, I think that in reflecting upon that and reviewing that, I think that some of my skill sets would blend nicely to serving this community.
Great. Great, thank you. Cormac, you kind of already a little bit talked about this in wanting to be visible in your next district and wanting to consolidate your time a little bit more. What strategies will you use or have you used in the past to balance your time in district regarding visibility in the community, being a superintendent kind of?
So I'll go back to when I first took over a building. One of the first things that struck me is your work gets done before 8 o'clock and after 3, 4 o'clock when kids aren't in the building, pretty much. And so understanding that when kids are present or needs are present, you need to address them. In terms of being engaged in the community recently, even last year, my colleagues and I, we intentionally, as we were rolling out this process, the investment in excellence, we intentionally went to every school, had a meeting with staff and faculty, had a meeting with the principal, and then had a meeting with other appropriate leadership positions to really help them understand and help to communicate what the goals of this initiative was, because there were some assumptions around that, to get feedback on what they thought it was doing or was not doing, and just to give them a chance to provide some input so that as we went back to our planning day in June, we could take that information. And I'll be doing the same thing again this upcoming spring in April and May, but this year intentionally doing it with school boards or home and school organizations depending on the school and how it's structured. So really trying to be present for them. Definitely being mindful of when the principal says, hey, it'd be great if you could come to this, being mindful of that, trying to make sure that I spend my time most efficiently. And if that means emails get done later at night, that's okay. I tell people, if you need something, here's my cell number, call me, text me. If you send me an email, it's probably going to be 24 hours, but it may not be the same day because I'm going to invest my time with the people that are in front of me. So I've tried to do that recently in my role, and really part of that has to be helping your community and those who you serve understand the priorities for the school, for the district, and where you can most be of use, right? Simply being present at an event is always positive, right? But it doesn't mean you necessarily have to stand against the wall or stand up front. Like, how are you going to be there and how are you going to use your time? So equally important part of that is how am I using my time to be efficient and not just, quote, be present. I mean, yes, you want to be seen, you need to be visible, but how do you engage and utilize that time is important, if that addresses your question.
What do you think your communication style is, and how would you plan to communicate? Might you grow on that and communicate with our stakeholders and our community and our staff?
So my preference is always, when possible, to communicate face-to-face. I mean, even within my office, I don't call somebody first. I'll walk up or down the stairs or down the hall to see if they're in their office. I'm always going to try to have that direct conversation. If their door's closed, if they're in a meeting, in a virtual meeting, then I might go back and either text them or just call them and say, when you're free, give me a call. So I always prefer, when possible, face-to-face. So, for me, in terms of communication, face-to-face is always best, right? Then it's what is the topic that we need to address and how time sensitive is it? Because that will then determine the response that I make. I might get an email, but if it's a little bit more sensitive, I'm going to call that parent, or at least I'm going to say, I want to let you know, I've seen your email. I'd like to talk to you about this. Then I'll try to call them. If it doesn't go through, then I'll say, hey, I attempted to call you this evening. I really like to set some time aside to talk to you. Here's when I'm available. So always going to prefer face-to-face. Over the phone is okay. If face-to-face doesn't work, we have the luxury of virtual meetings. So even if someone can't join me directly, or I can't join them, even a virtual session is still better than just the phone call or just the email. I want to try to be as direct as possible with whoever I'm speaking with, just to give them the courtesy and respect that they deserve, and make sure that we don't misinterpret anything in terms of tone or language when we read an email, or maybe get a voicemail. So that's always my preference. Going to defer to what they're comfortable with. Sometimes they'll say, well, let's just talk over the phone. Okay, that's fine. I'm happy to do that, but I want to offer that to you. So part of that, outside of just when you're contacted, is creating some expectations of when and how they'll hear from you and at what frequency. So making sure that you establish some patterns of communication that are known. So for example, with my building leaders that I serve currently, they know every Monday by the close of business, they're going to get what we call the building leader update. And that's going to come out every Monday afternoon, and that's going to be, unless there's something really, really sensitive, the core email they will get from me for the entire week. Everything that they need within reason is going to be enclosed in that email. Deadlines, opportunities, don't forget about this funding opportunity, this is due, hey, here's some great resources for you to share with your community or with your students or with your staff. So being clear in what the community can expect from you, that includes your building leaders, your teachers, your support staff, your parents, and even at varying grade levels, and trying to coordinate that with what might happen at the building level. Because I know parents' inboxes are flooded with communications, and so we want to make sure that we're very intentional and strategic in our timing of when those things come out. So we will do that with our building leaders. About 3 times a year, I will offer what we call our community update, where we'll provide an update on things that we're working on within the office, great things that are happening within our schools, advocacy that we're doing out in the community, and really with the core goal of, one, making sure that there's not a vacuum out there, because if you leave a vacuum, it's going to be filled, and unfortunately, many times it's not filled with positive feedback or positive news. So we're trying to make sure that we fill that vacuum in proactive fashion, and also, as I alluded to, our schools are spread out, really trying hard to build essentially a district identity, that you're not an island. One of the things we did this year is we brought all of our schools together for a diocesan-wide or district-wide virtual session, right? Just to show all of our kids and all of our staff that wherever you are in our community, you are a part of this school system, right? And there's kids across mid-Michigan and other teachers across mid-Michigan that are doing the same thing that you are. So we've worked really hard to try to, I would say, improve the image of our schools in the community, because I think for the last decade or so, it hasn't been as positive as it can be and should be. So really working hard to be intentional and strategic on that communication. Try to get back to everybody, an email 24 to 36 hours, just depending on the day and what happens. We know things happen. And I give out my cell phone number. It's on my email response, and people can text and people can call. So I'm open to try to be reachable as much as possible, especially for our employees. But just being very intentional, very consistent, and very deliberate in how we communicate, and even more so when it's not necessarily positive news. So try to be face-to-face, try to intentionally visit with communities, make sure we're engaging with various stakeholders. And that includes people in the community, not just those who are in our schools. Our alumni, that's something we've worked on a lot in this initiative, really trying to bring that alumni back and make them feel a part of our school system. Many of them attended schools that no longer exist, but they're still a part of our system. They're still a part of our history. They are our history, and we want to honor that. So those are some of the things that we try to do. I try to be positive in my communication, especially with our principals. end of the week every so often, just send a group text out, hey, thank you for all your work, thank you for what you're doing. Especially if I know, teacher or a staff member or principals had a tough week or a trying week, try to make sure I follow up with them. A lot of times on the way home, I will go through my building leader phone list and just check in with them one-on-one, because it's one thing to have a staff meeting, but it's another thing to give them that individualized attention and time and give them that space, not in front of their colleagues, not even in their building, but perhaps when they're a little more comfortable to really have a different type of conversation. So I try to meet them wherever they're comfortable, try to be consistent, try to be intentional, and as much as possible, always be positive and appreciative for the work that they do.
So the next question was around achieving transparency, building trust across the district. I think you've fully answered that in the last stuff, so I'm going to switch
Okay.
gears a little bit and say, how would you handle a difficult conversation with the stakeholders?
So my personal mantra, we'll start with a parent, right? I always believe that a parent is advocating for his or her child, right? They are coming to me to find a solution that they think is best for their child, the most important thing to them in the world. And so I'm always going to assume that lens when I'm hearing from a parent, right? And I'm always going to assume positive intent. They're trying to bring a solution that will obviously benefit their child, but I also believe they think that solution will benefit the school. And so they're not necessarily trying to be critical. They may have criticisms, and they may be founded and just, or they may not. But it's important that when someone comes to us with, a concern or an issue, I'm going to assume positive intent. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I want to work with them to try to find resolution. Now, the challenge is if the desired resolution is simply not possible for whatever reason. And so mentioned transparency earlier, right? I try very hard, the second thing I try very hard not to do is make false promises or guarantees that I cannot follow through on. Because one of the things that I committed to myself when I was not a building leader, but a teacher and administrator, I had a colleague who I respect very much, but every year we would hear, we're this close to getting blank. We're this close to getting blank. And not that I don't think he was trying, but those things didn't happen. And so at that point, I said, if I'm ever in that position, I'm never going to make promises or guarantees or commitments that I don't know we can follow through on. So often in those difficult conversations, and we may have that initial conversation, I want to make sure that, okay, whoever I'm speaking with, this is what I heard from you. This is what I heard your primary concern is. I want to make sure that, as we wrap this conversation right now, that I am completely understanding and accurately understanding what it is you're concerned about. We're going to explore possible things that we can do in the short term to try to address that. I may not address it completely, but what resources do we have currently? And I'm going to be very honest, like if that proposal that parent wants is really not possible, I'm going to have to tell them that's a great idea. However, for certain reasons, I don't think that's very likely, or I know it's not likely, or it's not going to happen. It doesn't mean we don't want to serve you or address this need, but that request, it's not tenable for us for whatever reason that is. And rarely are you going to have resolution on the first conversation, depending on the significance of the issue. So then what I will do is, again, making sure I'm aware of what that concern is. I will ask for, a period of time, 24 hours, depending on what type of research I might need to do or follow-up I might need to do, and say, when's a good time for me to reach out to you tomorrow or the following day? What I'd like to be able to do is go speak to my colleagues, because there will probably be people within the district that I need to make sure I communicate with so that, again, I can guarantee I'm not making false promises or I'm not making any misleading statements or putting one of my colleagues in a position that is unfair to them. So being very honest, being very transparent, and then committing to them, you will hear from me or you'll hear from us at this time, and here's how we can follow up. Again, making sure in the short term that if there's a physical need or a mental health or emotional need, that we address that. Then making sure if there's some follow-up that we need to do immediately with a teacher, staff members, support staff, that the appropriate parties are informed about the conversation, about the concerns, so that we don't unintentionally do anything that might compound that concern. And in some cases, you're going to have to tell that stakeholder, we're not going to reach resolution on that. It's not that I don't want to try. Here are all the things that we can do. Here are the things we've tried. Here are the options that we've discussed and why they might work or why they may not work. And ultimately, that's our commitment and our obligation to our families or our community members, is to help them understand what we can do. And if we can't, perhaps they may be able to modify that position. If they can't, then we need to be able to leave at the end of the day knowing that we did everything we can in an appropriate fashion to address that need. And in some cases, it doesn't matter what school you're in. You can't be everything to everybody. And at that point, this person would need to make a decision on what's best for his or her family or their family. And I genuinely believe, in my experience working in many different schools and environments, there's the right school and the right environment for every student or every colleague. And our first responsibility is to help them find that, whether it's here or whether it's somewhere else. That's my first commitment to them as a member of the community, is how can we serve them, whether it's here or through another organization or another resource. And even if I can't answer that question or give them resolution, I'm going to try to bring those resources to bear to say, I'm sorry that we can't fix this for you or give you the resolution that you need, but here are some resources that I'm aware of, or can I have someone reach out to you, right? And I'm always going to try to be proactive in that communication. I'm never going to say, well, you should call these people. Can I have this person reach out to you? What would be a good time? And hopefully there's respect that you've made every reasonable attempt to address that concern, and they can see that you were honest and forthright and transparent and listened, right? And that they felt heard. And even if you don't, and this happens, even if you can't address it, they know that, okay, they tried. They did everything they could. It's not possible. And now we have choices to make, whatever that might be.
Okay, I'm next.
All right.
I'm going to ask you some questions about student achievement.
Okay.
Okay. What are the most important areas in which the Oxford Community Schools should invest time and money to ensure student success?
So when we talk about student success, the first step is understanding what that means. And that can mean different things to different people within the teaching staff and the administrative staff, and that can mean different things to our families. And so I think the first thing that we need to do is really understand what that means for our students. And within a district, you're going to have varying definitions of what that is. So once we've identified some of those terms of success, whatever that might mean, we then have to reflect on what we're currently doing, how our resources are currently distributed, currently allocated, to is our work, is our effort, our energy, and our resources truly serving what we define as student success. And as I referenced at the outset, I think that currently Oxford has a wide range of options for students that allows them to see student success. At the upper, high school level, it's easy, quote, to define success as test scores and GPA and college acceptance, and those things are important, and those things have value and they have meaning. But it's not the only way that we measure student success. I will tell you some of the most joy that I've gotten in my career is helping those students that are not the 4.0 kids. It's the student that you bring in that you're like, this student's going to need a lot of help. And to see that student grow, right, that's success for that student. Having that student graduate, having that student perhaps move to a more traditional classroom environment, helping that student find his or her niche, whether that's in the classroom or after school extracurricular activities, is an important part of that student success. So how do we define that? How are we allocating or deploying our resources is going to be important. Getting feedback from our staff and faculty, they are especially our teachers, right? They can best tell us if they think their students are being successful. And they are the ones that ultimately we charge with, at least in the classroom. If we go outside of the classroom, our club coordinators, our coaches, things of that nature, they are the ones at the end of the line that have the most direct time with our students and who are best positioned to tell us what that looks like. And so obviously asking them, do you feel your students in whatever capacity you serve them are successful? What are those needs? So identifying what those needs are. Again, talking to students, they're going to know what success looks like to them. And especially I would say in the last 5 to 10 years, with everything that we've experienced locally and globally, that success might look a little bit different for kids now than it did 10 or 15 years ago. And so making sure that we don't, because we think something is working, keep doing it just for the sake of doing it, but making sure that we're assessing, is that program still effective? Is it still successful? Financially, really understanding essentially what is the cost per student for this program, and what is the return on that investment? You know, are we providing additional academic services? Are we providing additional counseling services? And are we seeing the resources that we need? Because it's one thing to say we have programs, which is great, but to make sure those programs are achieving their goals and doing so in a cost-efficient and effective fashion is equally important. Because if we can identify some savings or redundancies, well, then we can do more for our students. So we have to have a holistic definition of what student success looks like, and know that it's not the same for any one student. And really, that means getting to know our students, getting to know our families, and what success means for them, and really, hopefully, setting some of those individual goals that then we can identify within our strategic plan and within our school goals. Hey, you know what? For Johnny, this is something we're working on. This is a program we need to get him in. Right? And if we don't have it at that school, how can we get it to that student or that family? There's a lot of data that you can use to look at that. Obviously, test scores. I know there's been a lot of surveys recently looking at that survey data. You know, even one of the best things I think you can do is, and I've done this before with families, when we have prospective or current families, much like the principals, just calling them. Hey, I'm Cormac Lynn, I serve in this position. I just want to check in with you and see how your visit was, see how your semester is going. You know, knowing a little bit about that student and getting that feedback. Again, that kind of unexpected contact point where they may be a little bit more honest, right? And then that ripples out in the community. So I think just being very open to seeking information, not closing yourself off, not looking at a single piece of data, but a holistic approach of success and understanding that there's many ways to be successful. None single outcome is necessarily better than the other, but it's really knowing what's best for our students and how we can best serve them for whatever might be next in their life. And I always say to parents, you know, the hard thing, and educators especially, the hard thing as educators, you don't know when that switch is going to get flipped for some of our students, right? You go to the doctor, if you're not getting better, you know it's not working. But as educators, one of the challenges is we are investing in the student, and that dividend, if you will, doesn't always have a due date. And when you have that student come back, maybe when they've hit some adversity, or they've had some success, or they have their own kids and say, now I get it, right? Now I get it. And that is the ultimate success that we can have. And so we have to be patient in understanding that sometimes that success doesn't happen at the rate that we want, but understanding, as I say to new teachers, it is a marathon, not a sprint. And you can have a great first mile, but you better not sprint, because come February, it's going to be a bit of a struggle. And I think we need to take that same mindset with serving our families. It's a marathon, not a sprint, and we need to be in it for the long haul.
One more student achievement question. What do you see being the biggest challenge for its student achievement in Oxford?
So one of the comments that came up to me in the leadership profile was some concern around the ability to maintain some of the programs or programming, to be general. And so I know that there is a lot of pride in some of those programs, and that people are going to identify with those programs, whether they serve those programs as an educator, whether they're involved in those programs as a student or as a family or as a booster. And so in my reading, really defining and determining how can we preserve those programs. If we can't preserve them, why not? And again, being transparent in that. And if we can't preserve a program in some way, shape, or form, or can't extend those programs, making sure that we find ways to rechannel some of that energy or interest in those people that might be involved in the program. Obviously, continuing to move forward from the tragedy in Oxford is still very clearly in that report. I mean, there is no single path to recovering from something like that, and no path is the same. And so understanding that that need may exist for a long time, and that unfortunately, just due to potential litigation, we have to be mindful that our community is likely to be reminded of that over an extended period of time, and that's going to cause, it may cause, some reawakened or extended trauma. And so when we talk about making sure students are successful, go back to Education 101, right? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If a student or a stakeholder or a staff member doesn't feel loved, safe, and secure, no matter what you do, no matter what programs you have in place, they are not going to reach the effect that you want. And so that has to be the start of how does this program, or how do we preserve these programs that we feel are doing that? And if we can't, how do we make sure that we don't just end a program? And that's one of the things that has come out to me in my own academic research. It's easy to say, hey, we can't fund it, right? That's the easy financial piece. That's the business piece. And we have to make those difficult decisions. But equally important is understanding, okay, what is the human piece of that? And how do we make sure that although the economic piece might be done and decided, the board makes a decision, yay or nay, right? Well, then it's our job to make sure that as we serve our community, that we address those needs and make sure that we're supporting those families, those students, those staff members that might be impacted by that. But that's where I'm going to start, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if we do that, that's always going to be a good start, making sure that we can continue as many of the programs that we have. And if we can't, communicate why we can't, and being mindful of the needs in the community in the short term and long term, and knowing that there's no date when those needs may be fully addressed. And that came out clearly in the feedback as well. And understanding, equally important in that student success, people have to see, believe, and understand that you have student success at the core of what you do. There are business decisions that you have to make in the operation of the school, and that's the hard part. But making sure that when you make those difficult decisions, going back to your question about laying that out, here are the criteria that we use, here are the pros, here are the cons, here's why we can or can't do this. And if you can do those things and make sure that you're maintaining those relationships, again, hopefully even if you have a less than ideal outcome for a particular group within your community, that if you have built that trust and you've built that transparency and that openness, they may not like the outcome, but hopefully they'll be able to understand through your actions, through your words, through your deeds, that you made the decision that was in the best interest of the school. And that's the hardest part about being an administrator. You're often faced with making decisions that are in the best interest of the school, but it may not be in the best interest of the individual student or family. And that's where it's hard, because we want to serve our families, we want to serve our students, but we can't always do that. And that's a challenge.
So I think you touched on it a little bit. If you want to expand, otherwise we'll move on. How do you envision your role as superintendent here at Oxford? We'll use Oxford as a specificity point. That will bring together parents, community, outside organization, and the government agencies together to work to create a healthy learning and working environment for our staff and our students.
So one of the things that had to do in the non-public school world is really leverage some of those resources outside of a traditional district, because we're spread all over the place. One of my roles within my current capacity is working with colleagues in Lansing, working with policy advocacy, making sure that our community understands the issues that are essential for our school and the operation of our schools, whether that be a funding piece, whether that be a representative piece. So making sure that we identify the resources that are available, making sure that we're engaged in conversation and collaboration, as I alluded to earlier, making sure that we go to school board meetings or home and school meetings or school committee meetings so that those parents who we know are vocal, who we know are engaged, are well informed, and they can share that information as well and make sure the information they have is accurate. I've done a lot of work through my career with law enforcement to make sure that we're bringing resources to bear, whether that be for our staff or for our faculty. I remember a conversation I had with the local chief of police where it just started with the question, what would it cost for an officer to be on site? And that was a number of years ago. And that's how we got a on-site full-time officer. I remember calling an architect saying, our building, what would it cost? What could we do within the current structure of the building without being in any code issues? And that led to a complete renovation of that building, and then a commitment to build a new building. Making sure that our local legislatures are aware of what's important for us, right? Inviting them into our community. I'll be meeting with some next week on Tuesday as part of Advocacy Day. We invite them into schools, invite them to be present, and not just for March's Reading Month, not that there's anything wrong with March's Reading Month, right? But for tangible dialogue and conversation. Help us understand your position on blank, or let us help you understand our position or why this is so important for us. And so when you go to Lansing or when you go to DC, we are asking you to keep this in mind. Having the opportunity for community conversations in whatever format might be ideal. I use the term town hall in a loose sense, with some questions in advance, being able to respond to some of those concerns, or bringing stakeholders to the table. I think building relationships in kind of a contact group that you're going to be embedded with, not just within the district in terms of the operation of the district, but the local community, whether that be Rotary, city or council, things of that nature. Working with colleagues across local districts and neighboring districts, because one of the best things in education, doesn't matter where you are, is just if there's a need, our local districts and surrounding districts are going to help us. Unfortunately, we lost a staff member unexpected on Sunday, and we got great support from our local ISD Monday for our staff and our students. So making sure that you build those relationships so that when you have a need, you can bring those resources to bear, and not waiting for them to reach out to you, and making sure that you're kind of making the tour, if you will, early on, introducing yourself, making sure that you're present and visible. And also equally important, it can't be a one-way street. You have to ask them and understand how you may be of service to them and whatever their role might be. Community service is big for our schools, and making sure that if there's a need in the community that we can be proactive in getting our students serving in a meaningful way, right? Not just bring in $1 for this or bring in food. Nothing wrong with those options, but really intentional embedded community service. So building the relationships, identifying the resources, reach out to the local mental health organizations to build relationships. When we can't address that need, what are those resources that are available? Understanding the funding that might be available, grants, endowments, things of that nature, making sure that you're capitalizing those opportunities, or things that may not have cost but that you can bring to bear. So really working to, and this is a question that came up earlier, how are you going to engage the community? And doing that on a holistic level. And then you talk about bringing some of those stakeholders together to have conversations, to have listening sessions. And it can be informal, right? But having a very intentional cross-section of the community, whether it's business leaders, local elected officials or appointed officials, current families, families that are in the community that may not be within our school system for whatever reason, maybe they don't have kids, but creating almost a cross-section of our community where we can have some of that conversation and dialogue and get many of those voices at the table to really give us a holistic view on what our needs are and how we can serve our community.
What would be your philosophy on creating collaborations between school administrators and teachers?
So as I alluded to earlier, that is one of my, in general, biggest frustrations, just because there's so much, I think, uncapitalized potential in doing that. And I know as a teacher, there can be a tendency, like, I'm great, and you might be great, but that person down the hall or down the street or around the corner may benefit from your greatness, and I want to leverage that. So as I alluded to earlier, really making sure that we're providing intentional time to bring our teachers and our administrators together, making sure, I would say, as a principal, as a building leader, or as a superintendent, making sure that we're supporting especially those new employees, those new building leaders, making sure there's some intentional mentoring going on, and even if possible, connecting them with someone from outside of the district, because even if it's your principal, your superintendent, sometimes if I say the wrong thing, this might not look so good. So creating some support for them even outside of the district where they might feel a little more comfortable just for reporting reasons. And in our last few PD days, we've tried, as I referenced earlier, very intentionally to bring our teachers together with intentional questions in a very structured way so that they can collaborate. We created essentially some virtual sessions so that our teachers across our district could come together in the evening. Nothing super formal. Hey, if you want to jump on and talk about, I'm struggling with needs and wants in elementary education, who's got a great lesson plan? So I think there has to be an expectation that you can't be an island And if you're a great island, let's build that isthmus between you and somebody else so that we can benefit from that. I think just having that collaboration and conversation, especially among principals, that is a way to maybe identify and address some concerns that may be growing in the district, may be growing in a building, or some great things that are happening in a building, and leveraging those experiences, whether it's how we can address a need or capitalize on an opportunity. So there's an expectation, that we meet frequently. We meet in a regular basis with a clear agenda. I try very much to be respectful of people's time in those meetings. If it starts at 9, it starts at 9. If there's an end time, we're going to have that end time. And if we have to follow up, then we'll do that. But making sure that we have some common goals and that we're all agreeing that, hey, this is something we want to do. And those aren't all going to come from me. There may be district goals that have identified by the board or in our strategic plan, but equally important is getting that suggestions and recommendations from my colleagues to say, what's important for you? What do you want to learn more about? What do you need to best serve your teachers, to best serve your students, your families? So making sure that on that docket, on that agenda, there's equal representation. And then there's going to be conversation about, well, how are we going to prioritize these? If there's agreement on that, there's never going to be 100% agreement. Unlikely. Shouldn't say never. Unlikely. But if we have some general consensus, then hopefully the time that you spend together, there'll be a little bit more buy-in on that. But that's one of the things that I've worked hard on the past few years to try to do that with not just our teachers and our administrators, but other leaders within our system, because there is a tendency, I think, to be an island, and really working hard to try to break that. And that's important for the community. One of the things I picked up again in the leadership profile was a sense that there's some inconsistencies among buildings. And so whether that's a calendar, someone referenced a calendar, whether that's policies, making sure that we're clear on what the policies are, and not just what the policy reads, but what that means in action, and that we have a common definition of what that looks like. So that when we carry something out, we know with relatively high confidence that that was done the way that we've all agreed to. And there's a lot of gray in administration and in education. But if we can be consistent and intentional in bringing our stakeholders, bringing our teachers, bringing our administrators together, and try to reduce that gray by having that collaboration and conversation and dialogue and shared buy-in, hopefully that will go a long way to helping us be that much more efficient and effective and successful in the work that we carry out every day. So it'd be an expectation. There'd be some clear goals and objectives. We'd have some measurements, every semester. Where are we at on this? What do we think has worked? Is this still the ranking that we want? Do we need to move some of these? Are there some things that have happened within your building that we're noticing that maybe we want to reorganize that? So we're going to be intentional in what we're doing, why we're doing it, make sure that we're getting some data, evidence, and that might just be an anonymous survey to a certain group of our community or our teachers. Hey, how's this program working out? Right? I don't necessarily need a name. I might need to know what building you're at based on the question, but give us that feedback. And again, equally important would be that kind of informal being in a building, talking to a teacher, talking to a parent at drop-off or pick-up or an event. What do you hear about? What do you like most? What do you think we can improve on? Well, let's talk about that. If you could change one thing, what would that look like? So that collaboration can happen on a large group level, whether it's a diocesan or district PD day, whether it's a department meeting, whether it's a group of our administrators, whether it's an event with people in the stands, handing out hot dogs. It's always an opportunity to build that collaboration.
Thank you. As you can imagine, our student, staff, and community are still deeply affected by the school shooting of 2021. What experiences, philosophy, or trainings do you have in the following areas? School safety, trauma-informed care, crisis management, and policy management.
So school safety, as I alluded to earlier, that's been important to me, and one of the reasons that it's been important to me in my time at St. Mary's, it's a campus. It's essentially a small college campus, and a public street ran through that campus. And so that was something that I worked hard, I feel I worked hard on with my colleagues and with local law enforcement, with Oakland County, to provide training and support. Early on, we did things like Stop the Bleed. We brought Oakland County in to do active shooter training. We had often our local police department come in and give us some guidance. Another example in terms of safety, if anyone's familiar with the former St. Mary's Polish Country Fair over Memorial Day weekend, working with Oakland County Sheriffs to secure that environment. It was interesting, and we got better every year, right? So collaborating with the lead officer in Oakland County Sheriffs and with our school and local law enforcement and our residents to make sure that was a great family environment. That was a very learning opportunity, a great learning opportunity. And that was great dialogue, right? There was great conversation with local law enforcement, with county, with residents. What does this need to look like to you? So going through that over Memorial Day weekend for a number of years, 100,000 people coming through your gates, that's I would say, pretty significant safety opportunity, and I think we've done well there. Obviously, continuing with the safety piece, behavior threat assessment management. I've done basic and advanced course. I just did a refresher on Stop the Bleed on the 5th. I'm ALIS certified instructor. I've provided that training for our schools. I've continued to work with local law enforcement to make sure that we're doing the best that we can, and you know, no experience is the same, but last year, February, in the building I happened to be in that day, we had an active swatting call that resulted in a full tactical response. And I remember being on the phone and seeing 2 cruisers come in. So then I went downstairs into the hallway to see officers tactically breaching the hallway. And so I within that community, right, that was not a drill. To have that experience and to have somebody say to you, the threat was a white male in a blue coat, and you are a white male in a blue coat. We learned a lot from that. We had great, I will tell you that when we had our audit on that, our safety protocol was great. Local law enforcement, county law enforcement said we did a great job, and we learned from that to continue to get better. And we also very intentionally worked to support our staff and our faculty. Once we got to the point where we knew it was not an active threat, I walked through that building with law enforcement and the portion of the building that I was responsible for as we broke it up, getting kids out of classrooms and saying to them, first of all, nobody's hurt. Nobody is hurt. There's been no medical need that we're aware of, right? We're going to walk you down to the gym, and we're going to get you out of here, right? So that experience was the closest I think anyone could get to without an active violent critical incident. So we learned from that. We've continued to learn from that and assess what we've done. From a trauma standpoint, I've done some seminars with Michigan State Police, with Michigan Office of School Safety, one earlier this year, just understanding how we can best serve our students. Some of our PD days, we've intentionally set time aside for dealing with the mental health of our staff, our faculty, and our students. I wouldn't say it was specifically trauma, but understanding how we can address those needs. Even Monday, supporting our staff that lost a colleague. Getting that text Sunday. I was yesterday being in the building, being with that community in the evening for an event, and continuing to support them moving forward. So unfortunately, I've had some experiences that have allowed me to serve my community, hopefully in a way that they appreciate. There's a third part, I'm sorry, the safety, the trauma, what was this, crisis? Crisis, okay, thank you. And those are the ones that stand out to me from a crisis standpoint. From a policy standpoint, we're revising and rewriting our policy handbook right now. One of my roles with our state agency is working on policy, whether it be in Lansing, best practices across our schools. So policy is nothing that's unfamiliar to me. If specifically you're talking about safety policy and things of that nature, being very clear of, hey, the behavior threat assessment is a tool. It's there for you to use it. If it crosses your mind, the expectation is that you use it. And supporting my principals and carrying that out and being a resource for them. I would say policy, if you're not talking about a safety issue, I work with 3 different school boards, 2 different governing structures. And so supporting them, I think, is one of the primary roles that I can do to serve them, is helping them understand, okay, objectively, here's what I think from a district perspective, and other angles that are not relevant to public school. So serving our principals with policy, whether it's a school handbook, staff handbook. I'm on the diocesan cabinet, so policy for that unit as well. Working with local school boards, crafting policy, whether that's student discipline policy, employment policy, really anything that might fall under that handbook. So that's a normal part of my job from a policy standpoint.
Thank you. And as the new leader, how do you help the school district and community heal at the same time moving forward academically?
Well, again, go back to Maslow. We have to heal. We have to be on the work to put our families, students, staff, faculty, community on a path towards healing. Try to understand where they are on that path. And there's no single route. There's no single route for what that looks like. And then understanding how we can scaffold the support for them in that respect, also academically. It's not an either or. It's not a zero sum. It can be both. And I think you can do both respectfully. And so helping our community understand that while you might hear a lot about this, either category, doesn't mean we've forgotten about that. So making sure, as I said previously, going back to that intentional conversation and communication, making sure that we are continuing to honor those needs and address those needs, and fulfilling our mission, part of our mission as a district. So you can do both, understanding that everyone's in a different part of that journey, supporting them to the best of our ability. And that might mean being creative. If you talk about academic success or academic progress, how can we meet a student or a family where they are based on their needs on the recovery process? We may have to get creative. I've dealt with students in the past that for whatever reason, we had to get creative in terms of what kind of work did they complete? How do they complete their work? How do they demonstrate mastery? What is that timeline? And being open to some flexibility. That doesn't mean that you give up all influence, but there's some flexibility there so that we can honor whatever those needs might be, and they're going to shift from time to time. So we have to find a way to make sure that we can honor both. They're not mutually exclusive. They need to be joined together. And we're not pushing academic success to try to distract from the other need. And we're not using our desire and responsibility to support our community to abdicate our academic responsibility. So being very intentional and clear with our community, understanding here's our goals in these 2 areas. This is the timeline as much as possible. This is what we're working towards. Here's how we're going to measure that. And getting that feedback, especially on the trauma piece, we need to hear from them what those needs are, and from our teachers. I mean, compounded by COVID, right? Really being intentional of what are those needs and how do we make sure that we address them. So honoring both and doing both to the best of your ability, and essentially making sure your community is aware that you're doing that and striving to do that, and being open to, hey, I think we need to spend more time here or spend more time there. But being very intentional, very deliberate, and very communicative in how we're striving to do that.
Okay, from a district management standpoint, what is the level of involvement and participation of certain employees in organizational decisions? How do you determine what groups to include and when?
So the first question I would consider is who is impacted by this decision. That might be the employment piece. That might be at the end of this decision, is it a student impact? Is it a parent impact? Is it a community impact? So first of all, recognizing who's impacted. Second of all, understanding who is going to be expected to carry out this decision or policy, whatever it might be. Then thinking about what are the repercussions of this policy, whatever route we may choose to go on our district. Unfortunately, as an administrator, I think one of your jobs is to think what is the worst possible outcome from this decision, and how do we make sure that we mitigate that. So considering that this may be a building decision, but it does have district ramifications, And so that's where it might be, for example, if you have your cabinet, if you have your group of building leaders, perhaps you have a teacher group that is represented from the district that you may bring that policy question to or that decision to. If it's a policy matter, again, what is the board's role in that, right? There are certain responsibilities that different units have, and recognizing that and who should be involved. I'm going to try as much as possible to always get input, but the difference sometimes is input does not necessarily mean that you have decision-making authority or responsibility. It doesn't mean that your input isn't valued, but there are times where as a school leader, as a district leader, that is your responsibility to make that decision. And A, it's your job, B, it's your responsibility, B, you may do that to protect some of your colleagues, especially when you know it's a difficult decision. You're going to get the feedback, you're going to have consultation, but if you know that it's a difficult decision, I think one of your roles as a leader is to take ownership of that, so that knowing it's a difficult decision, I say to my colleagues, my building leaders frequently, not that I want to be the bad guy, but that is part of my role. I will be that bad guy in order to preserve your relationship with that staff member, with that community member, with that organization, because that I think is one of my responsibilities as a leader. And if it's going to be a great decision, come on down to the microphone, you can have it, right? So I'm always going to try to think about who is it going to impact, who's going to be asked to carry it out, understanding what the operational reality of that decision might be. What does this mean at the district level? What does this mean at the community level? And there will be times where I will defer to my colleagues. Not that the decision is important, but I also want to empower them to make a decision in appropriate areas. So I will, typically when we have conversations about decisions, I will always go last because I do not want to sway somebody or make somebody, oh, if I want to look good, I better say this. So we'll go around the table, and then I will offer my opinion, and I'll try to play the other side of the coin, and this goes back to my days as a teacher. I'll never forget when a student walked into my classroom, Mr. Lynn, are you a Republican or Democrat? I said, well, Jake, what do you think? I can't tell. That's perfect. I teach social studies. I taught social studies, right? And so I try very hard to think about different perspectives. What are the pros? What are the cons? There's always going to be cons. If I can defer in an appropriate way to a colleague, I'm happy to do that. I will always provide my input if I think the decision is significantly off mark or going to set them up for unnecessary challenges and obstacles. Then as a leader, you need to interject and say, hey, I understand why you want to do this. Can you tell me how you think this might impact X, Y, or Z? I'm going to try very hard not to say, this is going to happen, or I want to use it as a teachable moment. Like, tell me what you think about blank. Help me understand blank. Have you talked to so-and-so about this? Have you talked to whatever the stakeholder might be? So really trying to use it as a collaborative learning opportunity, but ultimately knowing that as a district leader, that is your charge at the end of the day, to make sure that we don't make a decision that we know is going to harm our students. Again, there's financial decisions you have to make on that front. And sometimes that means they make the decision. Sometimes it might be a vote. Sometimes they might vote, and I might retain veto authority, if I can say with the social studies civics perspective. And I'll tell them why. I understand why you feel that way, and this is one of the things I learned first as an administrator. I didn't fully understand before I was a building lead. There's always information that maybe you don't know, or conditions or factors that you don't know, or that aren't shared with you, because it's not going to help you do your job. And it's not going to be beneficial to the conversation. And so I learned once I took over a building, I give decision makers a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to assume that there are conditions or factors that I may not know about, or they may not be able to share, or don't want to share with me because they don't want to burden me with that, that is going to influence their decision. And so part of that might be, I understand this might be a little bit unpopular with the group. I'll share what I can, and hopefully I've built that trust and rapport where they believe at the end of the day, even if we don't agree, much like one of the opening questions, a difficult conversation, even if we don't agree, they will know that my heart is doing what is best, and in some cases, perhaps in this case, what I feel is best for the community, and that they had input, they had dialogue, and we'll reach a decision that we think will move the school and the system forward.
Kind of segueing right into, what has been the most unpopular or challenging decision that you personally have had to make, and how did you handle the reaction to that decision? What might you have done differently?
So closing a school is probably institutionally the most challenging decision. And when we were going through that process where the future of that school was uncertain, working with the leader of that organization, working with the CFO of that organization, working with the principal of that school, and then also working with parents, to be very honest and transparent. This is where we're at today. If we want this school to exist, there are various paths to get there. Let's talk about those paths. Propose paths A, B, C, and D. Tell me what you're most interested in. We'll identify which are viable. And so during that process, we had multiple community conversations, multiple opportunities for dialogue, whether that be in person, whether that be surveys, whether that be just face-to-face conversations. So making sure that we were answering questions, making sure we're providing opportunity for input, making sure we're explaining the operational factors that we were going to use to make this decision, and trying to be very transparent in that. And ultimately, the decision was made to close that school because the options that we presented, where we thought were viable for that school, we did not have enough momentum or critical momentum to offer any of them effectively. And so unfortunately, we made the decision to close the school. What stood out to me from that experience is I had a member of that community reach out to me and said, in 2017, we brought these same issues up and weren't heard. But in 2018-19, when those issues came up again, and you were here, we were heard. And we hope that this will continue moving forward. We also made sure that when we made that decision, we had an intentional plan for our families, if they wanted to continue to pursue that educational route, to give them options and to help support them in that process. So it wasn't simply, school's closed, last day is June 5th, we'll have a celebration on June 6th. Yes, we did those things, but we were also very intentional about making sure that we supported those families and staff in that transitional process. And I know it's late, so I'll be brief.
Off to me. I have questions about board superintendent relationships.
Okay.
How do you view the board superintendent relationship? How will you keep board members informed and communicate with us?
So first of all, I report to the board. I am the employee of the board, hypothetically. Right? That has to be a collaborative relationship. Right? Go back to being very intentional in communication. I would want to set, much like with our community, what is the threshold for communication with the board? It might be different for the entire board. It might be, if there's an executive committee, it might be different for the executive committee or certain subcommittees. So I'd want to have a very open conversation and dialogue about what are your expectations. That's what I need to know first. Obviously, we're going to have board meetings. We'd have conversations about what are topics or concerns or issues that you need to know about immediately. Anything that's potentially legal, 100%, that FYI, and it's a possible issue, right? Anything from a safety standpoint, we're going to push that forward. There has to be constant conversation, making sure that, I would say depending on the level of comfort, if that means there's a group text, if that means that hey, much like I do with our building leaders, there's going to be a board update every week that comes out, that it's going to be at the same time, roughly the same time every day, so that you know what to expect. I want to avoid piecemeal, just random offshoots of communication. I want to be consistent and be intentional, so that way you know what to expect, and I know what to expect, equally important, in terms of what is the reporting responsibility, whether it's at a board meeting, whether it's just through regular communication. So making sure that we're clear and consistent in what that looks like. I understand in that communication there's going to be challenges, there's going to be pushback, there's going to be give and take. And again, much like with parents, understanding that the board is seeking what they think is best for the district, as am I. And there's mutual respect for that, and we may not agree on what that is, Ultimately, we will, we have to, right? But understand as a board that that's part of the healthy conversation and the healthy dialogue that has to take place. So consistent structure, clear expectations, and kind of a timely schedule for what those expectations are on both sides of the table, if you will.
In an effort to achieve what is referred to in other industries as high reliability or just culture, how do you perceive the role of the superintendent in achieving this at Oxford?
What were the two phrases you used again, please?
High reliability or just culture?
Okay. So I can't, I don't know how you're defining those terms, and I don't have a working definition in my mind for this, but
So I'll give you one.
Okay, thank
Because I
you.
think it's important,
Okay.
especially if you're looking at Oxford as a future employment, is creating a culture of safety. So anyone at any level of the organization can report safety
Sure.
without feeling retaliation.
Okay.
And safety is a wide range
Yes,
of
sure.
variables. It doesn't just mean this kid looks threatening, but other
Yeah.
items that any staff level should be able to report.
So we'll start with students. Right? We know that students are more likely to come to school when they have someone that they feel values them and they trust, and will notice when they're not there. So making sure that we feel that within a building, within our population, that students feel they have somebody, not just a name, and it doesn't have to be the official name on the chart, but someone that they can go to. So that might start with talking to our staff and saying, who do you feel you have a good relationship with in your building or grade level? And that would happen at the building level. And kind of auditing that roster. Who's not on our list? What student is not on our list? And how do we begin to build those relationships? So there's going to be a lot of informal work that would take place there. But obviously, again, based on the feedback that I've read, making sure that we have a structure in place and making sure that there's somebody within that system that someone is not going to be a direct report to that they can go to. I don't know what the district has in place. I mean, obviously, statewide, nationally, okay to say things of that nature. I don't know if that would be an option within this district to create something like that, where there might be a kind of a local reporting agency that we can monitor to take feedback. I think having communication to the board and allowing our community members to bring things to the board and make sure they feel heard, listened to, building principals, teachers. Equally important in that is creating expectations of when do you bring certain topics to certain people and when, right? If it's a safety issue, 100%, you call someone until you get somebody on the phone. You don't just write an email, you don't leave a voicemail, you don't just text. That's my rule. If it's a safety issue, you call until you hear someone's live voice at the other end of the line and they acknowledge that. And if that's, hey, I'm sure about the student going home today because of what I heard, I'm concerned about a colleague, right? We need to have that touch point and make sure that is followed through on. So having an opportunity to contact someone they're going to be comfortable with, whether it's a student or a staff member, if that means possibly, someone within the union structure, if I'm thinking about teachers and administrators, that union representative, I would assume would be pretty essential in that process. That should be someone they feel comfortable going to. If it's our parents, is there, again, someone outside of the building where their child may be that hopefully they've gone through the protocol. I've talked to the principal, I've talked to the teacher, I really haven't gotten the response that I want. Who then do they go to? So being very clear in that communication and making sure that when that outreach happens, that there's follow through. Again, there may not be immediate resolution. So creating a clear structure, making sure that structure is communicated, making sure that we check in with our community, parents, students, staff, faculty, and asking it in an age and developmentally appropriate way, do you feel you have someone in this building that you can go to? And if the answer is no, then it's our obligation to help identify that person and build that relationship and create opportunities to do that. And we can do so in unintentional ways where the student may not understand what we're doing, but we know why we're doing that, right? So again, the structure needs to be in place, the response needs to be in place, and you're going to have to prove it, essentially, through your actions and through your response. And that includes me, as I said earlier, like my cell phone's up on my email. You want to call or text me, that's fine, right? And I also understand sometimes people just want to go to somebody, whether that's a building principal, central office staff, or a superintendent. I don't take that as a slight necessarily out of the gate to that building leader, that teacher. That's just who they chose to call. We're going to work together and we're going to fix this problem.
Do you have any questions for us?
and you don't have to answer it. It may be a question down the road possibly, but one of the things that struck me in the leadership profile, one of the things that came up a couple times was this sense of a divide in the community. And as I thought about this role, you know, that would be something that I would really want to understand. And again, we don't necessarily go in tonight, but that was a question that stood out to me. Another question, I talk about some concerns, future fiscal matters, right? And I looked at the data, and at least on a chart, the data looks good. So I'm curious in terms of what you might be able to share in terms of maybe outside of legal issues, what some of those financial challenges that are on the horizon that were referenced in that report. Or the first question, either one.
Well, I'll start with the second one.
Okay.
It's a much easier transactional type of question to answer.
Yes, I agree.
So, we, as a school district, and many school districts across the country received ESSER funds during
Yep.
COVID.
Mm-hmm.
In addition, we received some money related to the tragedy. Those are on a grant basis, and so those grants will be expiring at the end of this fiscal year.
Okay.
We have put in significant resources and
To retain 'em.
staff to support a lot of the missions that those grants were for. In effort to not lose any of those, we are looking at other ways and how we could resolve some of the budget deficits without eliminating any instructional staff, without eliminating
Yeah.
any mental health or safety and security supports.
And same thing on the non-public school. It's not called ESSER, it's called EANS. So understand that 100%, done the same thing, added positions, added support positions, in September 2024, right? That's it on the EANS funds at least. So thank you for clarifying that. The fund balance, you know, again, look good. So that's kind of why I was like, outside of that, I was wondering if there's anything else. So thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. To answer your first question, it's a little less transactional, but I think it goes to our healing journey. I think there are individuals in the district, staff community that maybe are further in their healing, and those who also are not as far. And you had already mentioned, there's a lot of media coverage that continues to recycle. It took 2 years for our guidepost report to come out. There's, I think, a lot of variable factors, and each individual person you talk to will have a different answer for why they may or may not feel this. I think more industry, I don't feel that we're divided, that we all want the same thing, but we're just saying it differently,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Okay.
But I don't know if anyone else has input on that, but I think that's probably the soft answer.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Most essential thing the board is looking for in the next superintendent of Oxford Community Schools.
I think someone that is, oh, go ahead. No, I do all the talking. You go ahead.
So I think that communication is a huge factor. I think we need somebody who is a very effective communicator and who is more proactive than reactive. I think across the board, those are our two main things that community staff, students are all really looking for, in my opinion.
Like I said, if there's a void, it's going to get filled. You can fill it or let someone else fill it. And so I'd much prefer to fill it. So.
And I think too, we need a strong, somebody who is a strong collaborator with our staff.
Okay.
So they have been through a lot as well,
Mhm.
and they have had a lot of change, and so
Yeah.
they are looking for a strong leader, but yet one that they can collaborate with as well.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate it.
Well, I think that's it for us. So we thank you again for,
Yeah, thank
For
you for the
coming out
opportunity and your service on the board. I appreciate that.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you to those at home and those who are behind me. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you again. Thank you. I will.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. I don't know why I feel thirsty today. All right. Moving on to the agenda, we have unscheduled public comment next. We have one, Mark Gillum.
All right, so my why, I'm here in support of my daughter, Giselle Gillum, who has been a student in this district for 7 years. I'd like to reference the candidates' questions, why the divide in the community, and I believe that the people who were named in the investigation, like Heather and Mary and Stephen Wolf and the others, there just can't be trust and healing when the people who caused and let the situation happen are still present in the facility or a part of Oxford schools in any way, shape, or form. So that's why there's a divide, and there will continue to be a divide until these individuals are removed, either by their own resignations or we will do it for them. The second issue was what happened with the finances. Number one, after November 30th, the November 30th board declined a free investigation from our Attorney General's office and instead delayed 2 years and wasted $3 million out of our budget. So that was $3 million wasted. And then we have over a dozen open lawsuits against the school and their employees who failed to protect our community, and it's the same group of people listed over and over. So I want to thank the candidates who came out in their interest in working with the school. They mentioned students must be involved in the decisions. That's great. They mentioned honesty and trust. Again, that's not going to happen with Heather and Mary or any of the other people that we've repeatedly named over and over. So we can continue delaying the healing process, or we can just have those people step aside so we can move forward. And that it takes trust and honesty to resolve trauma. So I don't think people are so far in their healing journey, Aaron. I think it's an avoidance mechanism that they're using to cope. So just some trauma avoidance examples are staff effort to silence students, but it ended up resulting in a movement by the students that was named We Will Be Heard and ended up going viral. The stoppage of student-led murals, victims' pictures and names being installed in a dead-end hallway next to the chair storage in an unused hall area. A post-board memorial. Students wanted victims' faces, names, no Wildcats, no Gold and Blue, and no Oxford Strong. But Vicky Markovich, Pam Fine, and Stephen Wolf decided to do the exact opposite. The individuals involved in the November 30th are using avoidance as a coping mechanism. Avoidance coping involves cognitive and behavioral efforts oriented towards denying, minimizing, or otherwise avoiding dealing with directly with the stressful demands. Emotional avoidance is a common reaction to trauma. And I think Heather and Mary are traumatized in the other's name. In fact, emotional avoidance is part of the avoidance cluster of post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms, serving as a way for people with PTSD to escape painful and difficult emotions. Emotional avoidance may be effective in the short term and can provide some temporary relief. In the long run, it often causes more harm as avoidance behaviors are associated with increased severity of PTS symptoms.
Thank you, Mark. Item number 7 on the agenda are scheduled activities. We do have one more candidate interview tomorrow at 5:30 here in the same building, OMS, in this media center. Thursday conversations with coffee, and you can see the rest there. Are there any final board comments?
I would like to say thank you to the candidates who were with us today and came to share their experience with us.
Okay. All right. Meeting adjourned, 7:50. Thank you.